Welcome to this practitioners discussion session on the world's best safety media campaigns, where we're discussing safety promotion and awareness campaigns from around the world as acknowledged through the International Safety Media Awards program. My name's Barbara Minuzzo, and I'm the coordinator of the International Safety Media Awards program, which is run by the Centre for Safe Alaskans. I'd also like to acknowledge the support of Safe Compact in providing the technical assistance for today's discussion. Joining me today is Mr. Simon Pase. He's the Manager for Creative Services at the Royal Children's Hospital, Melbourne. Simon has worked as a video producer and creative team leader at the Royal Children's Hospital for the past 12 years, tasked with communicating complex ideas and themes into simple and persuasive messages. Simon's background in television production and advertising, copywriting, scholarly interest in documentary film, and experience with countless patients, families, and health professionals has given him a unique combination of experience and expertise in storytelling. This is never more relevant than in health, where human science is often in conflict with our most human needs. Simon has presented internationally on the role of video storytelling in health and has received numerous awards for his work. Simon's personal goal, and for the team he leads, is to produce communication for health professionals, patients, and the public that are insightful, memorable, and empowering. Welcome, Simon Pase. Thank you so much for making the time to speak with us.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Simon, to start off with, can you tell us about your connection to the International Safety Media Awards program?
Absolutely. Barbara, I think it was a couple of years ago that we looked at the media program together, and I was so impressed with the entries that were coming forward, and I could see that there was a huge surge of media materials being produced by organisations around the world. And one of the suggestions I think that we came up with together was to refine perhaps the format of the awards to really reward creativity and originality. And it's been my pleasure to sit on the judging team now for 2 years in a row.
Right, yes. So let's turn specifically to your work as a video producer and creative services team leader. Where are some practical media production, what are some practical media production tips and must-do for creating effective media campaigns, videos, effective visual communication, design and infographics? What have you seen work well for safety media campaigns that aim to achieve the behaviour change?
I mean, that's a great question, because it's so dependent, I think, on the capacity that you have. The budget, of course, influences everything. So I think it depends on from where you sit. It sounds obvious, but to keep things simple and just not overreach. Being forced to keep things simple helps you to refine your message, and then you can layer the message from there. One of the other things I think is so important is to stay on brand. If you have a strong brand and you develop and nurture that brand and you stay with it, that is one of the things that will make your campaign memorable and will make it durable. And I think one of the most successful campaigns that we've seen in my home state of Victoria, your home state too, Barbara, is the road safety campaign from the Transport Accident Commission. This is a campaign essentially that's now maybe 30 years old, still original, but was groundbreaking at the time. And every TAC campaign is instantly recognisable because of the strength of their brand and the way that they've protected that brand. Despite the messaging maybe having evolved, the styles of the campaign having evolved, the brand is still really recognisable. And I think really something we try and ask ourselves to do every time we develop a communication is to make people think. And it sounds like something really sort of simple to say, and it's actually quite hard. But the audience is also asking that of you as a campaign maker or as a maker of a communication. Make me think. And we try and make that audience think about themselves, because ultimately you will act in your self-interests. So that's a mantra that we carry with us with every product that we make.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. So what do you think are some of the common challenges or pitfalls and successes for teams when they develop and implement safety promotion campaigns?
Look, I think there are some pitfalls, but one of the things we have to understand is that we have to learn from failure, or learn from our experience, at least. If we don't want to call it failure, we just have to continually learn from what we do. I think when it comes to safety campaigns, there may be some obvious pitfalls. I know that as humans, sometimes we use humour to cope with stressful situations or difficult situations, and humour is very hard to get right. So I'd say that's a pitfall you need to be very wary of if you're going to use that in a campaign to try and get a message across, because you could very easily fall flat on your face. At the best, I think it adds some light entertainment, but you run the risk very much of trivialising an important topic. But by the same token, I think shock tactics, which is one of the areas we might go to first when we're developing safety campaigns, they won't work if it's not believable. So you have to make sure that your message is going to be credible. And if you can't really reach that level of credibility, it's probably not worth going to shock tactics either. It's probably better to be more matter of fact. That's a safer ground to exist in and get that message really tight. And you might use, data evidence to reinforce that message. And if that's as far as you reach, if you don't overreach too much and that's as far as you go, that's a great place to start your campaigning, start a conversation and see what your audience is saying. One of the great things now is that when we share messages, we tend to get instant feedback on things like social media. So we can actually, nurture the journey of a campaign by understanding what our audience is saying and reacting, how they're reacting. One of the things I was taught as a copywriter was don't write the brief as the campaign or the advertisement. What that means is that a client may come to you with a list of facts. They may come to you with an objective, and they'll come to you with some information about the audience. And it's not our job necessarily to just package that information up into a message. It goes back to that central sort of problem of, can we make the audience think? If you want to push the limits of creativity, you really have to understand a way to make people think about that message, but not just be regurgitating those facts to them. And I think that's a really important creative challenge that you have to work your craft really well to achieve, but try not to write the brief as a campaign. And lastly, we talked about, this age we live in now of social media. I think one of the opportunities that people who want to communicate safety messages have now is to use peer-to-peer communications as a really strong way to influence people. We now live in an age of influencers, and we know that people trust the opinions of their friends and peers. They probably rate them just as highly now as the opinions of experts. Look, admittedly, often to their detriment, because the experts are in possession of the knowledge and the expertise and the evidence. But if you can find ways to create peer-to-peer communications, you might find that you resonate with an audience who previously is shut off from your communications.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Simon. Do you have any thoughts on production quality? So what do you say to the comment, it does not have to be the big city ad agency polished, production quality should be intentional to enhance the intention of the message? And you kind of touched on it earlier in the piece when you talked about simplicity, but I just wondered whether you had any further thoughts on the production quality. Well,
first of all, it's important to recognise that big big city ad agencies tended to come with big ad buys. So you would only engage an agency like that because you were going to spend a lot on the media. And that was probably, at its peak in the peak of traditional media, television, outdoor, print. And now we've moved past that sort of epoch, you would say, of traditional media. And we're now in this age of social media and digital. And so the big agencies probably don't play the same role that they used to. But you were going to use a big agency because you had that big media buy behind it. So it made sense to invest in an agency to maximise that buy. It's also important to note that what an agency, what your money bought with an agency was their time. Agencies have the luxury of being able to give a brief to a creative team and let them really devote a lot of time to understanding that brief, doing their own independent research into it, coming back to the client with a lot of questions. And because they were at arm's length from the client really didn't pester the creative team. So they had a lot of time to be quite creative and quite inventive with the messaging. Can you do that yourself? Well, you can. If you actually devote the time to the brainstorming and the creative, the sort of the concept development process. I think one of the pitfalls or challenges we might face is that if we exist in a space, say that I do, where we have our own production facility within the communication team, and it's part of an organisation that's putting out communication messages, the temptation could be just to rush into creating the messaging. And for really durable campaigns, I think you need to spend a lot of time just in the thinking about the campaign. And if you can afford yourself that time, you're essentially copying the model that an agency does. So do we really need big agencies anymore? I still think they play a really important role because they bring together, very talented artists in the craft of storytelling, copywriting, art direction, filmmaking. And when they get it right, they get it spectacularly right. So they still lead, I think, to my mind, that they still show us the way for very thought-provoking campaigns. But that's not to say that the reach and the influence that we can have on our audiences is beyond our reach, because we now have this amazing, world of digital communication and social media at our disposal, and we can be really smart with the way we use that. And if you think about that peer-to-peer model, you can see now the kinds of content that people are consuming doesn't come from ad agencies. It comes from people's bedrooms, yes, people's studies, people's kitchens, people on the road. Now the rise of the vlogger is now a form of influence. The rise of the podcaster is a form of influence. So these are things that are now available to us. So it's pretty exciting.
Yes, definitely. Simon, what about the production quality and creative, the changes over the years, the visuals and the video graphics and creative? So those changes that you've seen over the years.
Yeah, to sort of pick up on the last point, one of the huge shifts as well, apart from our sort of shift from traditional media to sort of digital media, one of the huge shifts that we've seen is the rise or the exponential availability of very cheap and accessible production tools. So that's been a huge game changer. It's been a game changer in my industry because, when I first trained in film and television, the tools that we worked with were very difficult to access unless you were in a production facility that could afford them. Now anyone can buy, a pretty good camera, like a sound recording kit. You edit at your computer at home. It all just works. So that's been, a game changer, and that's why we're seeing so much user-generated content. It's actually changed the nature of what we consume. I guess there's still a need for production quality, because if I'm going to dedicate some time to listening to what you have to say. If I'm going to try, I guess, to act on your message, it needs to be credible. And if you have production values that interrupt my connection to your message, that is, your production values fall short,
yes,
and the communication now is a challenge to listen to or to see, that will interrupt, my sort of understanding and willingness to act on your message.
Mm.
But we've seen now that people are very inventive and very creative with the cheapest of production tools, and so I think it's a pretty exciting time to see what can be done. What for us as creators, it's one of the really exciting things is just the miniaturization of technology. It's given us so much possibility in places we can move the camera and place the camera. And this is helpful to know when you're actually going back to that original concept development phase, because now we're able to be a little bit more ambitious. Those of us who have, I guess, an inclination towards, high production values, some of those things that were previously unobtainable without a big crew and a big budget now can be done by the low budget, video producer.
Mm-hmm.
I think as well, just because you have the tools of production available to you, it doesn't mean you need to exploit all of them. This has always been the trap, is that you cross another threshold of technology and suddenly you have to find a way to use all of that. But one of the most successful campaigns that we've been involved with at the Children's Hospital in the last couple of years was a simple 2-person interview between one of our paediatricians and one of our trauma surgeons about car seat safety. Yes. And we really did not overreach with the production design or production lavishness, you might say, to achieve that. It really was just the interview presented. But because those facts were so compelling, because that information was so new to a lot of people, they really didn't realise just how vulnerable children were in adult car seats. That campaign had huge cut through. It's led on to all sorts of things with partner organisations also developing strategies around that, and just a huge awareness among Australian parents about the vulnerability of their children in cars they previously weren't aware of. And when we set out to do that, we really couldn't think of a better way to do it than just to present the facts from 2 very, very convincing health professionals.
Mm. Yes, I'm familiar with that recording. In fact, I shared it on social media platforms myself, and I'm familiar with a lot of your work. I've been privileged to be familiar with a lot of your work over the last several decades, and it really does come across meticulously thought through and so on. So I've been really privileged with that. And yes, I agree with you. I mean, that particular recording with the trauma surgeon, for example, yes, it was quite simple, but it was so, it was really the information that they were presenting. It was presented by people that really saw the outcome of what happens when children are not properly and appropriately restrained in the car. So you couldn't get better than those people behind the camera to be speaking about it.
It sounds like, though, I might have sort of painted a picture of that campaign as being, very simple in its execution, which it was. But there was a lot of discussion leading up to that as to how to present it. And a lot of that discussion, if I reflect back on it now, was how do we actually, again, it goes back to that make me think, but there's probably another element from when you're doing a public health campaign, you have to win people's trust. I'm really, really fortunate to work where I do, because I think people who work in paediatrics have to work especially hard to win trust. And so they become, very good at it. And one of the things that I think comes through in that video is an empathetic nature. Mm. And so when you think about the production, you also have to think, how am I going to make that shine through? And part of it is about restraint. Overcomplicating the production might diminish the quality of the talent that you have, or it might sort of break the connection between you and the talent. So in a way, when I talk about simplicity, I'm saying don't draw attention to your work as the maker. Make the message the most important thing. And so if you can sort of exercise a lot of restraint in how you put something together so that the message actually becomes the front and center piece, and that you're generating that trust and you're displaying that empathy, it's probably going to give your campaign a lot of success. There is one, of course, a vital thing, I think, that always counts in video production for production values, and that is good sound. And it's probably the one thing that, if you've not come from a film and television background and don't have the exhaustive sort of, I guess, experience that we might have had in our training to get good sound, then it's worth researching and understanding that. It's worth spending a lot of time actually understanding how to get good sound, because if I can't hear what you're saying, it's probably a low chance that I'm going to stay engaged with your message.
Yeah. Yes, you've covered a lot of ground there, Simon. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Tell us, to finish off, would you like to share any further key tips for practitioners that are undertaking safety media campaigns? Is there anything else that you would like to add as key tips?
I think, look, I would like to re-emphasize the importance of brainstorming, because it's something that I think even we're kind of we're vulnerable to overlooking the time and investment we need to make in brainstorming. Pardon me, because we are so busy. We work in, pretty fast-paced environment where you've got short turnaround times for materials. But when you want to make something that, as I said, is durable, it is really worth thinking about, how you're going to frame that message, and then what's the most concise and effective way to communicate that. So that's really worth doing. And don't overreach with your technology or your scope of production if it's beyond you. If you don't have the luxury of a big crew, specialists in their craft, then stick to what you do really well. Fundamentally, going to that messaging, we try and say, make people think or make people care. If they care, they'll want to act. And then if you make it believable, that credibility, if you imbue your communication with that credibility, then they'll feel compelled to act, because they'll think it's about them. And look, the last thing is to really believe in what you do, because anyone who's involved in producing a public health campaign, a public safety messaging campaign, is doing really important work. And you should be proud of the work that you're doing. If you bring that pride to your work, it will push you. You will find the energy and the drive to push your creative boundaries, to spend that extra time on a brief, understanding it. And you will go to the extra care, the care that your communication deserves. And you'll find great satisfaction in your work. And if you have a growth mindset, that is, if you understand that your best work is still yet to be done, because you want to learn from every single communication that you produce, because, again, you really believe in what you do, really care about what you do, you will hone your craft endlessly. And I think that's a really exciting personal space to be in if you're really personally motivated. So believe in what you do, because it's really important work.
Yeah. Wow, thank you so much, Simon. Thank you so much for all your sharing today. It's been great to hear from you. Thank you for being one of our judges and continuing to do so. So thank you so much, Simon Pase. But before we finish off, just as a reminder that due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Safety 2020 conference has been postponed until November 2022, with a virtual global event to take place in the meantime on the 22nd to the 26th of March 2021. The winners of the 2020 International Safety Media Awards will be announced at this March 2021 global event, so stay tuned for information around this time. Thanks again for joining us for this discussion about some of the world's best safety media as recognised by the International Safety Media Awards program. Thank you to the Centre for Safe Alaskans for founding and sponsoring the International Safety Media Awards since 2006. And to all our global safety colleagues, as always, we wish you success in improving safety outcomes for your community. Thank you.